Welcome to the next training video, part of a series of tutorials for the Natural Heritage Data Explorer. Now let's have a look at the Map tab. You'll be prompted to read and agree to the terms of use, including the conditions of release about citing the DCR Natural Heritage Program on any maps or publications that you generate, a disclaimer of liability, and a disclaimer about the data. To move around in the map, you have a couple different options. If your mouse has a scroll wheel, you can roll that forward to zoom in, or roll backwards to zoom out. You can press the up arrow on the scale bar as well to zoom in, or down to zoom out, and you can also drag the scale block up or down to zoom in or out. You have the ability in NHDE to change the default base map by clicking on Switch Base Map in the top left and choosing from one of the 12 options, including an aerial imagery layer and a USA Topo Maps layer. We also have the ability to add resources in NHDE by clicking on the Add Resources tab. I can do this two different ways: a URL of a map or feature service, or a zip shapefile. To show an example of a URL of a map service, I'm going to copy an example that I already have and paste it into this window. More detailed information about the structure that the map service or feature service must be in can be found in the NHDE user guide. So I'll click Add Resource, and my layer populates in the map and also shows up here in my table of contents. In order to add a zipped file or a KML or KMZ file, I'll simply select File to Upload, navigate to the folder where I have my zip shapefile in this case, and click Upload. And I can see that my zip shapefile has loaded into my table of contents. In order to see the symbology for any layers in the table of contents, simply click on the plus button to the left of the name. So my map service example was a Virginia Administrative Boundaries layer, and my project shape was a simple polygon. To turn on and view any layer in your table of contents, just click in the box just to the left of the title, and clicking on the plus arrow to the far left of the title will show the symbology for that layer. If you move the mouse cursor and hover to the right of the layer title, a drop-down icon will appear. Click on that icon to see your options. You can adjust the transparency of this layer by dragging the slider bar towards less transparent or more transparent. This might be useful if you want to stack multiple layers on top of each other and have them all display in a map while still seeing the underlying aerial imagery or base map or landscape features. You have the ability to move this layer up and down within its category, to zoom to the full layer, to filter the layer, or to view description. Let's look at this for a moment. View description provides a short synopsis of that data layer. It also includes a link where you can find out more information. So in this case, it brings us to DCR's Virginia Managed Conservation Lands Database webpage. While we have the Managed Conservation Lands layer on, let's look at some of the tools that you can find in the top right of the Map tab. The first tool is the lowercase white I in the blue circle which is the Identify tool. Clicking on that will open it. It defaults to Identify Visible Resources, which means any layers that you have turned on in your table of contents. You can also select from any of the other layers in your table of contents. But for this example, I'm going to keep it on Visible Resources. You also have the option to identify by point, box, polygon, or line. I'll do an example of a point and identifying by a polygon as well. Once I click on that Manage Conservation Lands layer, it pulls up a details window showing me all of my results. In this case, I've clicked on the George Washington and Jefferson National Forest layer. Now let's look at an example of Identify by Polygon. A single click puts down a vertex, and a double click when you're happy with the shape. This brings up my details window. I see here that I have 35 results. I can cycle through those one at a time. Note on the map, these polygons are being highlighted as I cycle through my results. I have the ability to flash on any of these polygons and make it more visible on the map. And I can zoom to any of these as well. The details window will provide information about that data layer as well as a web link to find out more. Moving to the next tool to the right of the Identify tool is the Measure tool. With this tool, you have the ability to measure area, point to point, or to get a location. You have the ability to adjust your unit of measure here as well. To measure area, a single click will start drawing your polygon. Each additional click of the mouse will put a new vertex, and then double click when you're done, and you can see you've got your measurement result here. For point to point, a simple click of the mouse will put the vertex down, and you continue drawing the line until you're satisfied, and then double click, and you've got your result here. Under the location icon, you'll be able to get the latitude and longitude of any given point simply by moving the mouse cursor to that location. And you can adjust the format that is displayed in. The next tool over from the Measure tool is the Zoom tool with the magnifying glass icon. You can also adjust the scale of the map here. And this is where you'd put in a latitude and longitude in the correct projection in order to zoom to that location. And let's just do an example here. And zoom will take you to that location. The next tool over is Print, which allows us to create a printable version of the map view. We can give this a title, an author, and a copyright, and we can select landscape layout in PDF or the map only in PDF or in 2 image files. So I'm going to select PDF landscape, give it a moment to process, and you should get a link to your printout. And the map will show whatever data layers you have turned on in your table of contents and will display here in the legend. The next tool I'm going to demonstrate is the snapping tool, which is the magnet icon. Snapping allows you to precisely draw along the boundary of a layer that you've selected. So in this case, I'll select Manage Conservation Lands, and I will add that. Let's zoom in a little bit so we can see this tool work. I will click Measure and point to point, and I'll start drawing out here, and then by holding Control, if I wanted to precisely draw along the boundary of this Managed Conservation Lands, you'll see that my cursor just automatically snaps to that layer, and at this point I could precisely draw my boundary. And that's the snapping tool. The next tool I want to highlight is spatial bookmarks. Please note that any spatial bookmarks that you create will not persist when you leave this session. But if you're going to be working, let's say we want to create something here for Gleason Marsh, and we know that we're going to be zooming around, creating a bunch of different maps, looking at various data layers, maybe throughout the Commonwealth, but we want to keep being able to come back to Gleason Marsh quickly. We can save that as a spatial bookmark, move around, do whatever it is we need to do in this session, and then at any time we can just jump back to that location that we set. And you can set as many of these as you want. Just please do remember, these will not persist once you leave your session. The next three tools allow you to quickly navigate through the map extent. The globe icon will zoom out to the full view of the Commonwealth, and the back and the next will simply go back or forward to the map extent. In the Find Address or Place toolbar, you have the ability to put in an address or a place name and zoom to that location. Please note that this is a global search bar, so please be careful when selecting auto-populated drop-down options. This happens to be the correct address, and when you hit enter, it zooms you into that location. Let's have a look at how the data layers that we described in depth in one of the previous video tutorials appear in NHDE. Under Manage Conservation Lands, the various green colors denote state lands, nonprofit lands, local lands, or federal lands. The red color denotes tribal lands, and the hatching denotes a conservation easement that is co-held, or a special designation. To view the Conserve Virginia map, click next to that icon. Remember, this is all 7 category inputs stacked together. Some of the larger layers do take a moment to display, and if you want to view individual layers, you can turn those on one at a time. Under Conservation Planning, we'll see our Conservation Vision layers, as well as the Natural Land Network layer. To view the Potential Rare Species Richness layer, you'll have to zoom out to a spatial extent which will allow this layer to display. If layers are grayed out in the table of contents, that means the spatial extent is not correct to view that layer. Detailed information about this can be found in the NHD User Guide under the Help tab. Here we see our ecological cores layer. The Natural Land Network. The Forest Conservation Values layer. And while we wait for this to load, please remember, by clicking the drop-down menu to the right of any layer title, you can go to View Description and view detailed information about that layer. For more information, there's a link at the bottom of each description, and there is more detailed in-depth information in the NHD User Guide. Here we see our watershed impact model, the nature-based recreation access model with drop-downs for land-based recreation need and water-based recreation need. Next we have our Cultural Resource Preservation Index, our agricultural model ranked Class 1 to Class 5, and our development vulnerability model ranked undevelopable to already developed. Below our conservation planning layers, we have some reference layers, including the 24K grid, the National Wetlands Inventory, a scenic rivers layer with designated potential and qualified, a Virginia Department of Energy sinkholes layer, an NHD streams layer, showing perennial, intermittent, ephemeral, and other, a trails layer showing trailheads, managed trails, state existing trails, and state proposed trails, a USGS place names layer, and a VDOT roads layer. And below that, under the boundaries category, you have a counties layer, physiographic provinces, planning districts, subwatersheds, watersheds, and the Virginia boundary is always default turned on. Within NHDE, you have the ability to create a map displaying any data layers within your table of contents. So let's turn on our Manage Conservation Lands layer, and we'll click Make a Map. It'll default to a drawing type of polygon, but I can also draw lines, points, or text. I'll keep this on polygon for now, and click Add. The Draw Edit toolbar appears, defaulting to Draw Mode Polygon. I could also import a shape here, just as I did under Add Resources, by Select File to Upload, and navigating to that folder and importing that shapefile. But for this example, I'll keep it on Draw Mode Polygon, and I'll draw my project shape. Once I'm happy with the shape of that, I will click Accept. I'll click Edit Annotations, click the polygon that I just drew, and at this point I have the ability to change the interior of the polygon, to change the boundary, to add text, or to edit the vertices and adjust the project shape. So let's make my fill style not a solid color, but some cross-hatching, and I'll make my project boundary nice and obvious with a bright red, and I'll increase the thickness of the boundary. And let's add some text. We'll add this here. And let's make this a little bit bigger. And we'll say I'm happy with that. So at this point, if this is displayed what I want it to show, I could go back up to my print map icon, give this a title, an author, and a copyright if I wanted. Select print. And once my printout option shows up, I can view my map. If at any point I want to start over, I can click Clear All Annotations and begin again. More detailed information about map making can be found in the NHDE user guide. One of the other abilities in NHDE is the ability to search a data layer by any of the attributes associated with it. To do this, click the Feature Search tab. For this example, we'll do the Manage Conservation Lands. Note that I can do an attribute search or a spatial search for this data layer. However, that's not the case for every data layer. For this example, I'm going to select for attribute search Conservation Easement, Private, and I'll select by permission. Then I'll click Search. My results will appear here. So I have 2 results found for this search query. I can click on these and see detailed information, as well as a web link to that organization. And by clicking Zoom, we can see the highlighted parcels here from our 2 records. So now I'm going to click Reset. I'm going to close Attribute Search, and under Spatial Search, I'm going to search by, in this case, Polygon. So now I'm searching the Managed Conservation Lands layer by a polygon. I'll click to start drawing. If I'm happy with that polygon, I'll click Search. And here are my 4 results with detailed information contained within this table. And that's the Feature Search tool. Thanks for watching the Virginia Natural Heritage Data Explorer video tutorials. This training was for the public access side of NHDE only, not subscriber access, which requires a username and password to view sensitive natural heritage data. More detailed information about NHDE can be found under the Help tab by clicking on the NHDE user guide. Please email us with any questions at nhdsupport@dcr.virginia.gov. These video tutorials were funded in part by the Virginia Coastal Zone Management Program through a grant from the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration under the Federal Coastal Zone Management Act. Thanks for watching.